so before I wanted to jack it up, I wanted to get as much done as possible. When the truck's low, it's a lot easier to work on than when it's, you know, another 16 inches higher. So I pretty much got the whole front end off. The fender's just gonna stay on for now. Usually I take all that off, but I'm just need to get the motor out. This all took probably about, I would say maybe 30 minutes. The only problem is this used to be a slip joint, which means I could loosen it here and slide it and then move it. Now I gotta remove the whole column to get my exhaust off. One thing, now that this whole thing's EFI, it makes it a lot harder to pull it out. If this was carbureted, I'd already have it out and probably all pulled apart. But with all the extra wiring and all the fuel lines and everything now, it makes it a lot more difficult to actually pull this motor out. So now that I got everything I need to off now when it's on the ground, the easiest way to do it, I'm gonna push it back as far as I can and then jack it up and then start taking everything else off. The whole exhaust has to come off because the headers have to come off. It's kind of hard to explain, but how everything works, I can't just unbolt the headers. It's easier to put the header on than connect the exhaust. It's not like you can just unloosen it and take it out and try to put it back in. It doesn't work that way on this truck, unfortunately. Luckily, all this stuff is extremely easy to take apart, except the fact that that shaft is now solid, which means I have to loosen up the column, loosen that, move it. It's probably gonna take like an extra 15 minutes. Not a big deal, but when you add an extra, 10 things that take 15 minutes, it adds up pretty fast. So for that, that's about ready. Like I said, I'm doing, there's a reason why the dash is not in the truck anymore. You guys are gonna see that in probably the next video, but I sold the fiberglass dash that I had running in this truck, and there's a reason for it. I'm not going back to a factory dash, but you'll have to see. So let's get this thing pushed back. Let's get it jacked up. Let's get everything unbolted, loosen, get this, and then let's get this motor pulled. And then, like I said, then I'll pull the trans off it, and then I'll go over the whole top end, make sure I find out what the issue is. I think I'm just gonna put new lifters in it and call it a day. Check all the rockers, check the springs, check all that stuff, make sure everything's all good to go. And then we'll slap this trans back in, we'll put it back in the truck, and then we'll see how this thing runs. So everything's unhooked except the trans cross member and the motor mounts, that's it. So I have this little doohickey little thingy here, which I love to use. It's cool because you can adjust where you want the actual weight to go. So I'm actually going to get all that hooked up. I'm gonna leave the intake on. I'm gonna just put 2 bolts in the front of the heads, 2 bolts in the back of the heads, and then put more tension on the back, and then take the cross member out. And then I have to jack the cab up because the bell housing, the ultra bell in this is almost touching the cab. It will not come out. So I gotta jack the cab up a tiny bit, and then this will come right out. And then once I get it pulled out, I'm gonna take the whole top end apart and figure out what my valve train issue is. And like I said, I'm gonna take that trans, have it rebuilt, and either keep it on the shelf over there as a backup or sell it, and probably just keep this one until I break it. So let me get this all tied together and get this thing ripped out. So the motor's out. One of the hardest things to do about getting this motor out is this thing's in the way of the deep dish oil pan on the motor. And I actually have to jack the cab up and put 2x4s under it and then jack it until the motor slips out and the cab falls and it makes it crooked. Not a big deal, but it makes a freaking mess because the engine has to be like this for the trans to come out, which leaks fluid everywhere. But I got it out. Now, I don't know if you guys remember me saying that I had an oil leak and I was hoping it was coming from the back of the intake. Fortunately, it's not. It's all pretty dry up there. So I have a feeling it's coming from the rear main seal or the back of the oil pan. Can't be the oil pan, so it's probably the rear main seal, which kind of sucks. I just put a brand new one in. It was leaking immediately, which means I did it wrong. But now that the trans is out, which sucks because this is a pretty nice looking trans with the ultra bell on it that I painted. And now that it's out, I'm gonna take the trans off, pull the motor, put it on the stand, the engine stand, and take the whole top end apart, except the heads. Everything else, the intake, all that stuff. Check my lifters, and then put new lifters in if I have to, and then bolt everything back together, put the new trans on it, figure out that oil leak first, obviously, then put the new trans on it, and then shove it back in. But in the meantime, we're gonna detail like underneath and all this crap in the truck, because the oil leak kind of make a little bit of a mess, filling stuff up. And if you guys know me, I like to have everything super clean. So that's the next thing on the list. So let me get this whole mess cleaned up. Let me get that transmission pulled off, and let's find out where that oil leak is. So don't mind the mess in the shop. Obviously, I skipped a few parts of this, and I'll explain why, because as I was getting this truck apart, I realized that there's a lot more damage to this engine than I thought. So walk over here and I'll show you guys real quick. So I already have some cleaner in here. It's hard to see, but if you look down in there, you can see the metallic flake. There's a lot of metallic in the bottom of this engine. When I pulled the rear main seal out because it blew out, I found some copper shavings So I'm not a professional engine builder, but I know copper usually means bearing somewhere, right? So I don't know if I ever made any YouTube videos about this, but it's on my Instagram and my TikTok. But my balancer went bad when I was on the way to a car show. I ended up still putting like 100 miles on this engine with the balancer bad. I had no idea. So what I'm assuming is it knocked the crank out of balance, crank walked a little bit, wore some bearings out, and then that's when I put the new balancer on, that's when I had the lifter noise. And I'm assuming that it put some type of material, washed the engine, and it went into the lifters and failed the lifters as well. So I gotta pull the whole entire engine apart, which sucks. I'm hoping everything's good. I'm hoping the crank looks good everywhere. I'm gonna pull all the rods off, obviously all the caps, all the main caps. So this actually turned into a way bigger project than I imagined. Had some other parts ordered, new springs, and a few other things for the truck. They're already in, but like I said before in one of my old videos, one of my work trucks, the head gasket blew, so I had to push everything back. I gotta get the truck pulled in the shop, and I gotta repair that first. And then I'm gonna pull this whole entire engine apart, check all the bearings, check pretty much everything, and hope everything's good. Let's just hope this is some bearings. Maybe the crank might be polished. Let's hope the engine itself is not damaged. And if I have to end up pulling the heads off, I'll probably just send them out again to have them looked over. And if I have to do all that, I might just put a different cam and set up in this. And if I have to go that route, I'm going solid. I'm not staying hydraulic. People say stay hydraulic. I'm gonna go solid, make a little bit more power out of it, send it. So that's what I'm gonna do next. So the shop's a mess, as you guys heard. I had to do doing the head gasket on the Silverado. But I wanna go over a couple things on this motor real quick. I actually found out that it had nothing to do with the balancer. I'm not gonna point fingers at any company in regards to what happened, but the converter will be getting sent out to PTC, and I will no longer be using the company I normally use. But so all the bearings look good. I thought they weren't when I first looked at them, but I was very, very, very tired. But let me just pull this off and I'll show you. They look okay. I could replace them. The machine shop said I could replace them, but I really don't have to. It's just shiny spots, nothing you can feel with your nails. He said that's, normal wear. He said you can replace them. If you really want to do it, you don't have to. So as of for the crank, everything, these all look great on the crank. Even the thrust bearing itself looks good. The only spot is just right here, and it's not a gouge. It's just a little bit of a shiny spot. The machine shop said it's perfectly fine. It looks like it's a thing, but if you listen, it's smooth as glass. Everything looks good. So if you come over here, let me show you my thrust bearing. And as soon as you guys see this, you're already gonna know exactly what caused this. So look at this guy. So this thing is smoked, okay? And my biggest problem is the guy who built the converter wants to take zero responsibility. And when I say zero responsibility, I didn't ask him for anything whatsoever. I said, hey man, can you just look over the converter for me and just maybe cut it open, make sure there's no metal in there, whatnot, make sure nothing ballooned, make sure nothing like that, whatever. Something happened. Either the trans overpressurized, the converter ballooned, something went wrong, right? It doesn't matter. I have a new trans, but I want the converter going through, right? He told me to just dump some ATF in it and dump it out and put it back in the truck. That was the first straw. Second straw was I talked to him about the thrust bearing, what could cause it, and he got in super defensive mode and pretty much told me to go fuck myself. It has nothing to do with anything from the engine back. He said thrust bearings, converters and transmissions haven't been a thrust bearing issue since the 1950s. That's the biggest bullshit I've ever heard in my life. So we're done with him. We're gonna take this converter and send it to PTC and just have him go over it for the sake of mind. Luckily, all the other bearings are perfectly fine, which means it never got thrown out of balance, which is awesome. You can see I pulled off all these. You can even look. I can pull this one off for you real quick. Kind of hard to do it one-handed, but it's just normal wear. Like I said, there's no gouging. You can't feel anything with your nails. Crank looks perfectly fine. So he said if you really want, you could put all new bearings in it. I haven't decided yet. I kind of want to, but so we got new lifters for it because obviously they're done. And then we're going to check the rod bearings to make sure. And if the rod bearings look good, I'm not even going to pull the cam. I was going to pull the cam to make sure the cam bearings are good because metal went up, but I don't think metal actually went through the motor itself. So I think we're okay. So we're going to get that thing sent out. I'm going to talk to him. I might just get all all new main bearings. Why not? I mean, it's probably not that much more expensive, maybe like $100 more just to do it, be done with it. I'm not really sure. He said I should just, you know, run it as it's small block Chevy. It's not going to have any issues. So I just want to give you guys a little update on the engine. So after I get this whole project done, probably about another week, because I'm doing this only like 2 hours every night. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but next video will be me tearing this apart, putting it all back together, and getting this whole truck back together and running. So if you guys like this video, please give it a thumb up and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.